I'm looking for patterns, a pattern of expansion, a pattern of contraction, blockages. That's kind of my whole world. And so what I was trying to do was once I knew that this was a tool, right? Then I was like, how do I leverage it? It was all leveraging, right? So it was convincing myself that I was faster than I really was. And I was like, and if you really go back and you study the greats in self-help, it doesn't have to be performance oriented. They would say, if you tell a lie to yourself long enough, you'll believe it.
What's up, guys? How's it going? This is Sean French with another episode of the podcast, The Determined Society. Man, I tell you what, we got an amazing guest here today. This gentleman has done it all. He has one hell of a resume. And more than that, he has a great mind. And I'm super excited to have him on the show. He works with high-level athletes, pro golfers, Major League Baseball players, NFL players, NBA players, PGA golfers, LPGA golfers. It really doesn't stop there, ladies and gentlemen. He works with CEOs, COOs, and entrepreneurs, basically anyone that is looking to level up to an elite status. He helps them overcome obstacles to get to the next level. He's a performance coach. And this guy, let me tell you, I'm going to have to look at his accomplishments. He was the Pacific Conference Athlete Player of the Year. He was a two-time national champion. He was a University of Arizona Athlete of the Year. He's a two-time Hall of Fame inductee. He has the fastest relay split ever recorded. So to me, that right there is saying something big and impressive. Literally fastest relay split ever recorded. And the last one that I'm gonna notate here is something that I want him to explain, because I don't even know. I didn't even do it once, but he is a 23-time All-American. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Seth Pepper. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time.
Absolutely. Me too, man. What 23-time All-American? How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, I was told that anything in the top 16, right? So top 16 in the nation. So I was in the top 16 in the nation 23 times, whether it was individually or on a relay. So when I graduated, I had scored more points in the entire nation in my graduating class. So that was a big ROI, return on investment, conversation in my head.
Absolutely. No, listen, I'm not hating on it. I found it very impressive. I'm like 23 times. Oh my goodness gracious. That is one hell of a stat. So one hell of an athlete and one hell of a professional. And you work with a lot of amazing athletes, and just like I mentioned, CEOs, COOs, and entrepreneurs of the like. And what are some of the common trends you're seeing with some of those high performing people?
Let's just jump right into it. I mean, that's a very, for me, it's a hot button, right? Because I'm on the front line of performance. And I think what I'm seeing, I would just describe it really simply, that people are playing scared, and it doesn't matter if it's on a field or if it's in an office, or in a classroom. I'm just seeing it more and more. My personal take on it is that we have, as a culture, moved more and more into a digital, environment. And in that digital environment, those are great tools. Awesome. We can connect with everyone on the planet, it seems like. But what tends to happen, as far as from the mental perspective, is that when you share something, right, you're telling your story, let's say, or you're telling your children's story. It sounds great. In essence, it is great. But where that gets framed in our own mind or in our children's minds, that's kind of the area where I'm starting to see that it's getting, to the point where, let's go to the business world. When a company wants to, get out there and market to the public, what do? They brand, right? How do they brand? They tell their story, right? So that's what I'm seeing, is that we're doing this on an individual level, where we're branding and we don't even realize we're branding, right? Now, why do I say branding? I mean, to me, branding is, go back to that corporate model. Branding is when you're wrapping in your results, the sell into, the story. And that just happens naturally. And that's all well and good. All of it's well and good. Again, it's the effect that it has on the individual. And so if the child thinks, oh, well, this is great, my parents are sharing my results, that's awesome. It's all good, right? But if that child starts to go out onto the playing field and feel like they are their results and they're no longer a person, that's where it gets dangerous. And so I try to create a separation. You are a human being, not a human doing, right? And that's a little bit more than the philosophical. It sounds like philosophy. I mean, to me, it's very, very realistic that I want them to be able to fail. That's the space I work in, is that we want to fail, and we want to fail often. And if they are, holding back from failure, that's disastrous in the performance field. So
you said it right there. I think a lot of times you talked about digital, and then you talked about just the athlete going out there and being so result driven to a point where they're being scared to fail. I think the digital world plays into that scared to fail, right? Because let's just talk about social media. And I've talked about this on a previous podcast, but when I was playing and when you were swimming, right, we didn't have this technology. We didn't have the ability to truly go out there and market ourselves or brand ourselves. We had that blue chip recruiter that would come and sit in our living room, offer a package, would have a folder with, the plastic little sheets and everything, showing your parents like, hey, listen, I can get your son or your daughter in front of all these college recruiters, and you pay them a service, right? That was about the extent of it. And then you had to really rely on your skills and your high school coach to promote you, right? Which I wish it were more that way now. And I'm sure we'll touch on that. But what I'm seeing now is, let's say, baseball player A goes on a recruiting trip to, say, one of the biggest schools in the SEC. Then he goes on the biggest one of the ACC, and then Pac-12. And all of a sudden they have like mock-up photo shoots, and they're in their football pads and their uniform, their baseball uniform, and it's this big old production. And it starts early. I mean, there's kids, going and doing this at the freshman year in high school, and they're going out there, and let's say, okay, well, I've committed to University of Miami. Well, now they've told the whole world that they've committed to Miami. So for 4 years, you are not Sean French. You are that Miami commit, and your whole identity is tied to your performance and tied to where you're going to school. And that's just the first part of the equation. The right side of the equation is when you go there, and if you fail, your whole identity shattered. That's a problem.
Yeah. And what I'm working from the performance perspective, because we're getting ready for battle, more or less, right? The battlefield of the athletic world. And so everything is about results, and that's the space I come. I think that's the reason why I can be so effective, just not just in athletics, but also business, and also arts, is to be able to deliver consistent results. Now, when you go into the results and you start to pull apart, okay, why were we spiraling, right? That whole sort of internal dialogue, one thing goes wrong, and then it's like, oh, here we go again, and they're just off to the races in a negative direction. That's what I'm trying to unwire. And what happened out there is that they got into full survival mode, fight, flight, freeze. So they are triggering, right? Because we're going out, we're being in a place, in a position, in an environment that's all about pressure, right? Whether it's on a field or in an office or a classroom, pressure across the board. So you feel that pressure, and then all of a sudden you feel like your life's in jeopardy if your identity is, in jeopardy. And so what I'm trying to do is, get them basically, out of that trigger format, or the reference. I want to disconnect that so that they can go out there and they can fail, because we're going to learn something if we fail. If we identify with the failure, though, and hold on to it and take it personal, then all of a sudden that loop just keeps on going and going, and it spirals out of control. So now, we're all seeing, the Olympics are one example across the board, whether it's the Summer Olympics, with Simone Biles, and then Chiffron in the Winter Olympics, and then you're seeing it in the NBA, a lot of people were concerned about Ben Simmons in the playoffs. I mean, you just can basically name the sport, and there's an example at the top that's going through this, right? They're standing under the basket and they pass it rather than take the shot, right? That's obviously they're in some sort of, survival mode where they're not processing the information in a normal way. And so if our top people are doing it, then what's happening to the whole ecosystem? And, you probably, if you talk to college coaches, they'll say, they're kind of dealing with the wreckage of what's happened before, when they were younger. And so if our top guys and top females are, I just think they're symbols, it's not just them. It's not because they have many millions of dollars. It's they represent everything that comes down below. It's like a, trickle down. And so for me, I've started to look at it because I work with all different ages, right? And so I worked with a world champion 8-year-old. Yes, there is,
there's a thing. That's a thing.
There's a thing. And when they're talking to me at 8 and 9 and 10, and I'm all about goals. I want to find out what lights a fire in them. And they say, I want to get a D1 full ride scholarship. And that to me, just, how do you even know? Like I was a D1 full ride scholarship, and I even, I was just doing it. Like I wanted to race against the fastest people in the world. That was it. I didn't realize it was D1, right? I didn't even think of that distinction. And so at 8, people are talking about it. So we have access to the whole ecosystem. And it's just a major shift. And I don't know if people really are aware of the impact. To me, it's like we hit the iceberg, like in the Titanic, and all these stars that we're seeing is a tip of the the iceberg. And just like in the movie The Titanic, the band is playing on, just saying everything's normal. Everything, just keep acting normal. It's just that person over there.
Yeah.
It's just the number 1 female in the entire world, right? Oh, it's the most clutch, figure of the Olympics in the summer. Oh, it's just the same in the Winter Olympics. Oh, it's the top, guy in the NBA. Like what?
Yeah.
Like these are the top people. If someone could handle the pressure, it would be these people. And so the whole ecosystem, I think, is in question.
I agree with you. And it just goes back to, you mentioned, Simone Biles and all those other athletes. There was major blowback there, right? At the public judgment. And it's because, people aren't seeing the human being. They're seeing a human doing, like, you're the best in the world. How are you feeling this way? Like, first of all, that's an ignorant statement. These individuals are on the biggest stage in front of everybody. They have a microscope on them, and they are the best in the world. They're going to have things go on because of the human being element. And I just think it's a very telling. I love the analogy with the Titanic, because that's true. Like the youth sports and the high school players and all the different sports, they're just the band right now. They're playing, everything's fine. And they're going along with this whole thing. And, I mentioned to you before we started recording, I spoke to a parent this morning in the gym. He's actually a neighbor of mine. And we just got to talking. I was done with my workout. And so I was talkative. And he goes, hey, I got to ask you a question. I feel really bad right now. I'm like, okay, what's up, man? He goes, well, his name is Sean. He goes, I started my son Sean in baseball this year. I said, cool, that's great. How's he loving it? He goes, he loves it. I go, how old is he? He goes, he's 7. I go, perfect. He's like, well, parents on the team, because my son's not as good as a lot of the other kids. I mean, they're very advanced. They're very, very good. And they were just kind of telling me that, hey, just don't worry, be patient. He's a little behind because he started so late. It's like, wait a second. What? Late. He's 7 years old. I don't think I started playing baseball until 8, and I played at LSU. Like, yeah. I wasn't even like really good until my sophomore year in JUCO. Like when I lost all of my baby fat and I started working out hard, like where did we go wrong, Seth? Like, when did this happen? Because, I saw that a big organization came out with 7th grade rankings recently. Yeah. In baseball, 7th grade rankings. What's next? Are they going to have a toddler division? Like, I just don't understand what's going on. And all the while, these players are being exposed, first and foremost, and I'll get to that. These parents are being bamboozled, and it's taking on a family dynamic where all they're doing is packing the car or hopping on a plane. They're not spending any real time with each other, and they're just traveling to play baseball, and that's all they're doing. And what I meant by expose is these athletes, whether it's AAU, baseball, or, competitive dance or gym or whatever, if you aren't the best dancer, the best baseball player in your area, why are you flying across the country to go play? Because at that point, it's not exposure. They're getting exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
When did this happen? Like, it just happened. It seems like it happens. Like, it's kind of like that overnight success everybody talks about that took 10 years to happen. Yeah, but exactly. What was because I remember I coached travel ball. I'm not against travel ball. I think it's great, for the right players, but the way that youth sports is going right now, it's driving hard on being a human doing, result driven. And again, and I tell this people all the time, I am result driven. I love results. I'm an athlete. I'm an entrepreneur. I want results, but I also don't tie it to who the hell I am. I'm a human being. I'm a husband. I have 3 children, right? These kids are being taught at such an early age that they are how they swing the bat or kick the soccer ball. So, sorry, I went on a little bit of a rant there. Didn't let you talk.
No, you're just speaking what's on my mind,
That's good, because you have a beautiful mind. So I'm glad I'm in.
Appreciate it. Well, maybe if I went back and told a little bit of my history, then I could frame up a little bit on what you're talking about with the age. Is that all right if I share a little?
I would love that. I would love
on
that.
The athletic side. Okay, it's because I work in a space where it's subtle. Right. When you start talking about the mind, it's like, it's easy for people to kind of go, oh, yeah, I know that's important. Goals are important. Maybe a little bit of visualization. Oh, that I get that kind of stuff. But I can actually stare someone in the eye and say, look, I got the story. This is real stuff. This is tangible stuff. This is going to be the most powerful thing you've ever done. Right. My story. I started at the age of 14. Right. Twice the age of what you just mentioned, right? I started out of my own reasons, curiosity. I fell in love with the Olympics when I was little, and my parents were not, my dad built classical guitars. My mom was an English teacher. So we were more like an art family. And so what was athletics? It was a hobby. It was nothing they could relate to. Right. Which is perfect for me because my internal wiring was just, I'm going to go explore and put this together myself and own it. And so when I started, it was watching the Olympics, and it was determining which sport I could actually get access to. And I'm from a small town, so it had to be something that was pretty popular. Narrowed it down. It's going to be the Summer Olympics. Narrowed it down. I chose swimming. When I started focusing on swimming, that, it's this whole process of curiosity. That's why I reference a lot with Kobe Bryant, because even though we know the end result, if you really study what he did, it was self-made, right? And he's all about trying to understand, can I get there? And he talks about that story the same way, for me at the beginning was, they're on the TV, and they're in the Olympics. Can I go do that? So it was a curiosity. It was not like dominance. You see the end result on ESPN. It is not that. It is this process of constantly, and one of my favorite quotes from Kobe is failure is an illusion. Now, the only reason he can say that failure is an illusion is because his total focus was on the process. It was on the process of getting better. It was never about the results. It's not that he didn't enjoy, the good things that came along, but right after he would win the world championship, he'd say, find me at the gym, 4 a.m. tomorrow, I'll be there. Because the process is what fed him. The process is what made him happy, and I've gotten the chance to meet with the Yankees, meet with, you name the organization. I've gotten a good, glimpse into the, behind the scenes. And what's interesting is when you talk to a world champion, right? And you ask them, what's the experience like, right? A lot of it is the process, like what I learned about myself. And then they'll say, the shocking part of it is that as soon as I won the championship is as soon as I wanted to get busy earning the next one, right? So it's not even about the trophy in the end. If you're going to make it to the top, you got to be a student. And so for me, I was starting as a student, 14 years old, watching the Olympics, girl wins the gold medal. Announcer asks the question that's in my head, which is the next step of the process, the journey. What's next? He said, I asked her, where did you go? What'd you do? If there's someone out there that wants to do what you just did. I said, whatever she says, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm all about timing and just making a clear choice. And thankfully, she said, I went through a YMCA, so youth program, and there was one in my small town. Went down there, walked up to the head coach, and I said, I want to go to the Olympics. Can you help me? Right. So it's clear of mind, right? It wasn't cocky, arrogant. I didn't say I was going to the Olympics. I said, I want to. He asked me if I knew how to swim. I said, no. So he started laughing, but he said, okay, that's fine. So he sent me over to go, learn how to swim and train with the 8-year-olds, right? Little kids, 7, 8-year-olds. And they were about half my height and they were kicking my butt every day. Now, I look at that journey and I go, that is a bizarre thing to even think of, that's even possible. Go do it, put yourself through it, especially as a teenager, But what was the gift that keeps on giving with where I'm at now and our conversation that we're talking about is I started in a state of failure. I didn't see it as failure, but I work with some of these top people in the world, in the nation. First thing I got to go through is you got to get that gorilla off your back. And I'll be like, what do you mean? So no, I can see it. I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in just the way that you're carrying yourself. The gorilla is your identity, right? You've been carrying around that trophy room, around your chest, from youth sports. And right now, man, you're in a D1 program. You're the #1 recruit in the nation. We got to hit the reset button. None of that stuff matters. You start over now, and you got to get rid of, you got to put that gorilla down because it's a lot of weight, right? On your back, on your shoulders. And I don't think you can move as quickly, with something like that on your shoulders. And then also your sports become your job. You're not even having fun doing this thing that you started out, just wanting to hit a ball or swim to the other end and race everyone or whatever it is. And so for me, I'm in this kind of interesting juxtaposition of having my own story be that, okay, I started late, super late, learning how to swim at the age of 14, failing all the time, just curious about the process. Parents, dad didn't pay for my sport, right? He said, it's a hobby. Remember, he's a loving person, but he's also helping me with life lessons. So I was old enough to go find a way. So I worked at the horse barns, right, in the summers to be able to pay my dues.
Right.
So I do that. And then also he said, you got to get yourself to your practices and your meets, right? So my parents never went to, it sounds probably someone might go, well, are they even supportive? Yes, they're supportive of where it matters, right? And personally, I didn't want them there. That was too much pressure. Even if they asked me what the results were, I was like,
right.
Ease up, back off.
Yeah.
But it worked for me. So I used to ride my bike 10 miles a day to go to workout. Now, you ride your bike for 10 miles just to get to the workout, you're going to make the most of that workout, right?
Sure.
And then if you fast forward, eventually in swimming, we have kicking sets. So where you just use your legs. When I get to the D1 level, the top level, top team, one of the top teams, no one can kick faster than me or longer than me. And I know that that's a direct result for what happened at the beginning, which was the resistance. The obstacle is your way, right? The stoicism of it, keep going, keep grinding. And then the other thing was my parents didn't go to my meets, and I was totally fine with that. I mean, like I said, it allowed it to be my experience, my experiment. So when I started, my dad, lovingly, he's always given me books. He's into self-help. So he had this book on memory. And he said, there's a few pages in here on this study that's happened in East Germany. And in that study, they were shooting baskets, free throws. They had one group that was physical only, another group that was mental and physical. And I had no idea what mental training was. I didn't even know that you could do that, like that you could train your mind. And then the other group, they didn't even touch a basketball, right? All they did was mental training. Results come back. The group that was the lowest by far was physical only. The group that was the highest was the mix. And then this group that didn't even touch a basketball was only a little bit below the top group. And I was like, what the heck are they doing? And that's what took me down the rabbit hole. That's where I was like, oh, I can train my mind. And that's what started the whole process. And within 4 years, the first thing I did was I cut out, Sports Illustrated that had like an Olympic issue. And so I went and I got an idol, right? Pablo Morales, he was in there, cut out the picture, put it on the wall, took my picture and put it on the wall so that I could see that every day, connecting the dots in my mind, in my subconscious mind. I was all into this sort of understanding of how powerful the mind is. And so then you fast forward 4 years later, state champion. That's pretty good.
Yep.
And then the next thing that I did, and I always tell these parts because, we have an audience that's probably going to be about youth sports going into college, speaking it into existence. Your thoughts become your words, become your actions. So when I get clear up here, I can walk up to a head coach with no experience and say, I want to go do that, the ultimate. Can you help me? And if you said no, I'd go find another one because I'm clear up here. So I went to, I went again, starting the next phase. I went and I found the top 20 schools, D1 schools, and contacted them all with a mission statement. I said, this is who I am. This is what makes me unique. I see that you want to go do this. I think I could be an important ingredient in that, and I coach people from that perspective. I help, athletes, because I say, if they have to come discover you, someone's getting a paycheck to have to do the legwork to find you. Now, I know that makes you feel good because you've been discovered, but is that your first choice? Have you ever thought about going and actually contacting the place you want to go? And I've had result after result of people going and just doing that, whether it's and again, you can do that in business too. And so eventually I went to the university, University of Arizona, like you mentioned. Sophomore year, I'm going against the Olympic gold medalist, and I'm beating him the entire race until the final stroke. So within 6 years of training with tiny little kids, learning how to swim, using my mind equally as my body, I became one of the best. And then by the time I was a senior, I was a 2-time national champion, like you had mentioned. And then again, to go counter to what people's expectations are. Because if you look at that, no one ever spotted me. No one ever saw me throw a ball or do something and go, hey, you know what? You should keep doing that. It started with me. It started up here, right? And then when I have a brother who's 2.5 years younger, He's the opposite personality type. He's not going to be the student necessarily the way I was about the sport, but he liked the social environment, being a part of a team. And so he started swimming when he was 17. Okay. True story. All this 14 and 17. These are like ancient age. This is like a joke. And so he started swimming. He learned how to swim, all that. Had to go to junior college for a year to kind of show that he was going to on the same trajectory. Because my college coaches were watching him and saying, well, maybe the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. We'll keep an eye on him. He proved himself enough. He came to the University of Arizona also. And senior year, he gets up on the blocks and, kept it really simple with him. Your brother did it. You can do it. And all a younger brother wants to do is beat their older brother.
Of course, yeah.
Dove in, and he took the race from start to finish. And we became the first brothers in the same event to win the same national title in the history of swimming, right? And we started at 14 and 17, right? And we had to get our butts to our own workouts. It goes counter. And I don't want to say that people should change, because I like the support and I think it works well.
Sure.
But for us, I think it was, evident that you can do it without, right? And that you have to kind of, on some level, the kid has to be bought in, like it has to be their journey. So we were able to do this. And like I said, our personalities are completely opposite. So the only thing that we really share in common is that we know the power of the mind actually works, right? So if you go back to the youth, that goes counter to all that youth culture that we were talking about.
That's exactly, dude, this whole time I'm getting bullet point after bullet point in my mind. There's so many things, 3 things here that I want to touch on. First of all, it's an amazing story. It says a lot about who you were as an athlete, who you are as a person, who you are now as also a professional. I'd like to think too that it's spilled over into your marriage and you being a father and just who you are and how you make people feel. A couple things, and I want my listeners to really, really dial in on. Not afraid of failure, not afraid of starting, not afraid of doing it on his own or finding a way. And, you mentioned your parents, people would say, well, they didn't really support, but they did, in some very, the most important ways. Your parents did something for you that I know is not going on in many households today. That was their support. They looked at you, you were 14 years old, and like, this kid wants to swim all of a sudden. He wants to go to the Olympics. Okay, show me. Show me what you're about. I'm going to make it so tough on you, because in 3.5 years, whether you're an athlete or not, you're going to be in college and you're going to have to figure out on your own, because you're not going to be under this roof. So at that point, your parents are like, okay, well, it's 10 miles to the swimming pool. Go ahead. So you went 10 miles there, trained 10 miles back. That's 20 miles of bike riding just to get to practice. So it allowed you or trained you to not only be physically fit, but also mentally fit. And that's the most important thing of what you do and what I do is that mental fitness is the most important link in the chain. You can be as physically strong as you want, but if that mental chain breaks, the whole chain is going to shatter. And what the other thing is the process. I hear this all too often, and sometimes it still plays in my mind, and I have to go to my coach that coaches me. I'm like, dude, I'm thinking about this. He's like, Sean, you're focusing on the results right now. Like, dude, get out of there. Like, you know how to do this, but get out of there and focus on the process, right? Marry the process and divorce the result. And, it's crazy because if you look back at one of the most successful coaches ever, it was John Wooden. Modern day Nick Saban. Some people like to think that Nick Saban's so focused on results, but that dude is focused on the most minute process. And so was John Wooden. It was every single day, put in the work. Don't look at that scoreboard. At the end of the game, at the end of 4 quarters or 2 halves or whatever it is in college basketball, that we're going to win if we handle our business. And that's what you learned at such an early age. And, that's important for entrepreneurs as well. someone like me building out my business and going through the early growing pains. And I like to imagine, if you rewind when you started, maybe there was some moments where you got stuck looking at a result, and you had to remove yourself and be like, dude, you know how this works. Focus on the process. And that's what I think these kids nowadays need to look at. But more importantly, I think they're so impressionable, and they're seeing, this digital age, this technology. They're seeing all their friends fly to wherever and play whatever tournament, and their parents are, getting hopped up and excited about this and spending thousands of dollars to go get them exposure. And I just don't think it's advantageous for every single player. You're seeing 8U baseball teams now, Seth. 8. My son's 8. Like I can't imagine. Listen, Little League, right?
Yeah.
We play Wednesday, we play Saturday, and then we practice Sunday. My daughters have dance. My wife has yoga. Bobby likes to go play, do tennis lessons, because we're trying to, make them well-rounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our business, my workouts. Like, how could I can't imagine traveling, 4 days a week for baseball right now, and my kids 8. It just, to me, it drives me crazy. And it's almost to a point where I think it's self-serving for some of the organizations and the adults that are in charge of those organizations. And they see this like, well, hey, we've got 3 teams. Let's do an 8U team. That's like another 16 grand. It's getting bad, and people are starting to really get upset about it.
Yeah.
What is your take on all that?
Yeah, I think that, again, we're seeing the signs from the top down, and I think that I'm working with people that, I'm trying to steer, out of the wreckage, so to speak, because the part of my story I haven't shared yet is that I didn't make the Olympic team, right? Pablo came off my wall and into my life. He was the one that there was a good thing. There was a good thing.
Right.
One good thing was he handed me the national trophy when I won. So that was super cool to have that whole full circle. But he also got back in the pool, and he did what's never been done before or since. In one season, he made the Olympic team, and he took the spot that I would have taken on the Olympic team, right? So I was the runner-up. So, be specific when you really put it out there that your heroes have to stay retired.
Well,
and then, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's amazing. I just be specific when you put it out there, because you need them to be retired and stay retired. I just think it's super special because you're touching on a lot of visualization, a lot of law of attraction stuff. And I do want to get there because I fully believe in it. And I believe whatever we set in our mind as a clear and can see, I call it on the movie screen of our mind, we can see it, then we can actually truly go out there and do it. But I interrupted a thought. I apologize.
No, I jump in anytime. So yeah, I missed the Olympic team that time by 0.2 of a second, right? So you can, that's maybe an inch, I think.
Yeah.
And then the next time, 4 years later, I go back in a different event, and I finished 4th. I'm the 4th fastest American, and I'm 4th in the world, and I missed it by 4/100ths of a second. So, you can't even see that with the naked eye. So someone else for the rest of their life gets to call themselves an Olympian, and I don't. I won everything else. I went to the World Championships, won medals. I won the World University Games gold medal, Pan Pacific Games gold medal. I won everything except for even I just didn't get to go to the Olympics. But that to me is my lesson in what's really important about the process. And so I can speak from personal experience and be able to say, look, we're not going to get caught up in those results, because if you get that identity, because what I struggled with when I was done with swimming, I had such a strong identity that when, people in my circle would introduce me, they'd say, here's Seth the swimmer, kind of rolls off the tongue, Seth the swimmer's in the room, hey, have you met Seth the swimmer? And there was a certain point where I was like, this is really cool. I really wanted to prove that I could go out and do this. And I did it. Right. But after a while, you're kind of like, the identity kind of gets a little bit like flat, two-dimensional, I just want to be Seth. And I'd say, just introduce me as Seth. And they wouldn't. They were just proud and they enjoyed the moment. Well, I had panic attacks after my career, completely debilitating panic attacks, where I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I couldn't get in the car and drive without having to pull over and having to walk around the block for about 3 hours just to bring my nervous system down. Right.
Wow.
So it was full fight, flight, freeze. And then I went through a program at UCLA on repeat exposure, so that again, I always felt like everything in my life, a weakness could turn into a strength. So through my training, internally, my mental health situation, I was able to train myself back to a strength. So the fear is not gone. I just manage it now, right? I manage it better. I detect it earlier. And so I'm able to speak from both sides of, performance and health of the mind, and be able to say, if you don't figure this out now, you will have to figure it out someday, or you're going to have to medicate the hell out of it. Right. And that's a slippery slope. I understand that there is, some good reason to do that. But not everyone, and for me, I'm very thankful that I pushed through the weakness and made it into a strength, so that I know that I can handle it and I'm not dependent on anything or anyone. Right. So that's what I try and coach, is that, people need to be able to be beyond the doing, right, and be a human being. And I try to get that at an early age, so that they see the separation, that you're going out to play this sport, and this sport is a choice. It is not, it's not who you are. Those results are not you. You're actually going and choosing to go out there on that field and play it. That's a choice. You're not, it's not interwoven with who you are. And little kids, they just don't, that it's not there to be able to make it that clear. They get so wrapped up in it. And then if you get into specialization, that's really, really a tricky space, because what if that sport, there's just so many great examples, Patrick Mahomes, and when he won with Kansas City, the previous year, they'd say it's because he scrambles and he does things from all the other sports that he played. It wasn't even like, they weren't saying it because he was the greatest football player of all time. They were saying, well, he does things because he gets really creative out there, because he's used to scrambling because he played all those other sports. Right. So there's just there, I just think that we need a lot more balance in the world, whether it's mental or it's physical. And I think it's an important subject that we all need to kind of start to because what I'm seeing in my coaching, it just happened yesterday. I mean, it happens every day, where you start with someone and they're in a youth league, about 16 years old, right? And they go into the draft. There's a draft for some of these youth leagues, right? Selection process, but it's mock, it's like a mock-up of the actual draft, right? There's a whole thing to it, right?
That's intense.
We're falling in line with what's going to happen in the pros, right? If we get there, big if. So what happens is the coach, if that coach is not the greatest coach, starts coaching as if that is a salary played kid or player, right? So now it's shifted from a team environment to a business model, and you don't even see it coming. And all of a sudden you're going, the parents are going, this doesn't really feel right, but I don't know how to speak up because he's the coach and the systems in place and everyone else is, falling in line. I don't want to, spoil this thing. And I'm not sure, but I don't feel good about it. The individual does not feel good about this. You know,
that
if
sounds
they heard the
terrifying.
conversation of the coach and what the coach said to the player, actually heard that, as a parent, there's going to be a defense, mechanism inside of you going, is that right?
Right.
Can he really talk that way to not only my kid, but is he talking to the whole team like that? But what he's talking business model. He's made the child a commodity. It's a product now. It's not a person anymore. And the parents don't see it. They can just feel it. So I don't want to blame the parents. In this whole thing. I don't blame the parents, because they're loving. They're trying to provide. They're trying to give, access. I mean, there are plenty of examples. Maybe they're living vicariously. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just inexperienced in that sport. My daughter, she's 10 years old. She loves gymnastics, right? When she was 5, they were like, oh, you know what? She's really talented. She's really picking this up fast. And I'm detecting a business model in this, right?
Yeah, of course you are.
Yeah. You want her here more often, because you're going to charge me 2 or 3 times the amount. And then what? You want my 5-year-old to go and compete every weekend in a different city? And they kept pushing. And then they started talking amongst themselves. And my daughter would come home crying, saying, yeah, the coaches are talking about me as if there's something wrong with me, Dad. I went and confronted the owner, and I said, I was one of the best in the world at what I did. I started when I was 14. My brother was one of the best in the world at what he did. He started when he was 17, right? Don't start selling your model to my 5-year-old and then have all the people that are on your salary trying to bully her into doing what you want to do. And still to this day, she's in classes that she wants to do that have nothing to do with competition. They have everything to do about just self-expression and just enjoying gymnastics. Like, whatever happened to that? Just enjoy the darn sport.
I think those are some really good points there. And I want to go back to, and I want to thank you for introducing a new perspective to me. Not that I blamed the parents, or thought that every parent had a living vicariously through their child complex, but like, I just want to thank you, because you said, you don't blame the parents. And really what's going on is these parents are doing the best that they can with what they have. They love their daughter, they love their son, and they see how much they want to be that professional baseball player, that professional volleyball player, whatever it is, swimmer, Olympian. And they want to give everything they can, even if it's their last red cent, to actualize that dream of their kid. And I see this as something that these organizations, these businesses, like you said, are imposing that business model on that 5-year-old, on that 8-year-old, or whatever the age is, to a point where they're driving that sense of urgency. These kids are going home. This is what it takes. This is what it takes. If I don't do this, I'm not going to make it. And like, what that does, it gets into their mind at such an early age. And when they go and they are in college and they are technically a commodity at that point, right? I mean, let's just be honest, right? Yep. If you don't get it done, Seth, there's like 10 Seth Peppers waiting to jump off the block. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so for me, going back to that a little bit about me, that's how I was in college. It was a complete shock to me, right? Because I went to LSU and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to LSU. This is like the pinnacle. This is what I've always wanted. And so I kind of already took myself out of the game, because I was no longer that dude walking around. I was the guy like, oh my God, I'm at Disneyland. Like, look at this, right? And I wasn't prepared. And I broke mentally, because I had all these expectations, from whether it was from my father or, just fear too. I was letting fear really drive me, because I was always told, if you don't make it in the major leagues, then you're going to be in trouble. Like, you don't have any other skills. Like, who you are as that is your identity. That's who you are. And so for me, I didn't really understand how to navigate through that in college. When I got to, the SEC, there was an injury, right? There was a surgery, then it was like a 2-year rehab. And then I finally got back on the field, went from 6th string to 2nd string. My senior year, got some playing time, but it still wasn't good enough. Right. And it didn't get any better. Right. Because again, that's my identity. And it starts from an early age, just like you said, 5 years old, whatever age that is. I did start a little bit later, 7, 8 years old, but like from that point on, I was Frenchie the catcher. I was Sean the baseball player. And so when it was over for me in 2003, boy, did I just implode. Like I literally was the worst person. I lost friendships. I wasn't a good person. And it was because I was so hurt and completely distraught because I didn't even know who the hell I was.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think that, that was my, a little bit of my story. And that's what, propelled me into doing what I'm doing now, striving to be a performance coach like yourself, like Ben Newman, like all these dudes that are having such an amazing impact on athletes and CEOs, because you guys understand the mental aspect of everything. And I always say, like, I just want to help people, because I'm working with high school athletes right now, and some Division I college baseball players and Division II college baseball players. And it's just, the stories are so similar, and I feel it, like I have a reaction to it, like in my heart. I'm just like, oh man, dude, I feel you, bro. Like I know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
It's almost like these coaches, sometimes, I'll probably get some blowback for this, but sometimes I feel like they don't know how to communicate with young adults.
Yeah, I think that just because you're a coach doesn't mean that you're, good at even your job, let alone, communicating. So,
Right.
I mean, I went through some coaches early on, and, challenging, because I wasn't their model. I wasn't the kid that had been in the program for a long time. It was this sort of freak thing that came along, and I did an event that they weren't really familiar with,
Right. You were that alien. You were
So
that kid that didn't even know how to swim when you're 14, and all of a sudden you're banging down the door of the Olympics. Like,
yeah,
this kid's an alien.
what's he talking about going to the Olympics? What's wrong with him?
Yeah, come
And
on
then,
now.
oh my gosh, he qualified for districts. Oh my gosh, he's going to state. Oh my gosh, he won state. And then I'm gone. I'm out of town, right? I show up and I'm gone. I didn't need to be the favorite. I was never the favorite. Everyone should know that. I was never the darling kid, because there's always a darling kid that's the coach's pet. I was
Right.
not that at all. I was breaking all the rules. And I knew that I was breaking all the rules up here first, so, I'd have people that would say, you can't keep doing that, and what they're saying is you can't keep improving that quickly.
It's
And I'd
interesting.
say, why not?
You keep pointing to this, and we've talked about it, we've touched on it. This is what we do, right? So,
Yeah.
When was it for you that you truly understood? I'm guessing you're going to go back to that moment, right? But there was probably a lot of times throughout your young adulthood where it just became solidified. Like my most powerful tool is between my ears.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I didn't have any other things, because I was all in, right? I felt like I was Indiana Jones. My whole career was, it was pressure sensitive, time sensitive. And so, like there's the old, Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, there's this big boulder rolling down and he's barely getting out. That was my whole career. I got this short period of time. I got 4 years. I didn't come from a family that could really afford, going to college. So I knew that my dream was dead if I didn't get to a point where I could, market myself to colleges, right? And so I didn't have the time to sit around and go, does this work or doesn't it work? It made sense to me. Some part of me, I mean, like the saying that I have behind me, unlimit your potential, that popped into my head when I was like 6 years old. So I've been wired to do this. I'm wired to look at things really super simple. As you can kind of tell, the way I communicate is really like, I'm giving people like something quick that they can remember and take it out under a pressure situation out into the battlefield. I'm wired that way. That's my way my mind works. And so I'm looking for patterns, a pattern of expansion, a pattern of contraction, blockages. That's kind of my whole world. And so what I was trying to do was once I knew that this was a tool, right? Then I was like, how do I leverage it? It was all leveraging, right? So it was convincing myself that I was faster than I really was. And I was like, and if you really go back and you study the greats in self-help, it doesn't have to be performance oriented. They would say, if you tell a lie to yourself long enough, you'll believe it, right? So that's, to me, was my mental, training was,
it works
I'm going
both
to lie
ways,
to myself
positive and negative. You're right.
all the time. Yeah. Or like, and I love to study the greats. So it's an ongoing process. I feel like I'm evolving with the people that I work with at the same time. Like, one of the phrases that I like is Tyson, how he says, it's all delusion, and until you make it, right? When you make it, then everyone, goes, oh wait, you just did that. You're world champion now. They don't realize that your entire career up to that point, people were laughing at you, making fun of you. Like I got to a certain point and I'd be at school and I'd be at lunch and someone would go, hey, I saw the headline that you did well at districts. Are you going to go to the Olympics? They start teasing you. Kids tease you because they're threatened. And so I coach people through this. If someone is threatened by you because you're stepping into your greatness, they're just projecting. It has nothing to do with you. And if you think of how many people took things personal, and that became the end of their journey, or that became the fork in the road where they headed off and, went away because so-and-so said that I was a dreamer. Imagine how many killed dreams.
Yeah.
And I coach people through that because there's one story of helping a guy on Monday. He contacted me. I had no idea who he was, didn't even know the sport that he was in. And we started talking. We had a 45-minute conversation. And he said, I got this practice on Thursday I really care about. Okay. And so I could tell that I'm looking for patterns. He had this pattern of self-sabotage, right? He definitely had the ability, but every time he went to anything that could be a performance, a competition, some weird thing would happen. Like even like mind-body connection of like, he'd get a rash, weird stuff like that. Yeah. Just different weird things like that. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try and steer him around any sort of these sort of self-inflicted, barriers. And so I gave him a tool just to, kind of trick it and go around it. And, it was this identity sort, it was a temporary sort of, allow him space to just be delusional for that Thursday practice. So he goes to Thursday practice and he calls me up all excited afterwards. And he says, I made it. I said, you made it? I thought it was just a practice. He said, no, it was a tryout for the NBA. I'm now in the NBA. So he had been in the G League, minor league, the Gatorade League on Monday. And then the top team, the world championship team, selected him in this tryout. And the only difference between those 4 days was up here.
It's amazing.
So I experienced it. My brother experienced it. And now this complete stranger in a 45-minute conversation just basically unlock what's going on up here temporarily. And then he goes to the top. So, I mean, that to me is like, that's massive. And if you take something like that and you apply it, I've been able to help sales executives in the fastest growing tech company in the world. They contact me and say, hey, would you train me like an athlete? Yeah, let's do it. Took him from the bottom of sales all the way to the top, doubled second place.
Wow.
In a matter of 2.5 months. And all I did was have him focus on the metric of the rep. You know that in sports, it's all about the rep. Kept saying, is it really that simple? Yes, it is that simple. And I'd calm him down. I'd bring him back to what's the metric? What's your commitment? What's the little tiny thing you're going to do today? You do this. Got straight to the top. Now he's the manager of all the sales executives. He's got the dream job and he's really young too. And I said, now you've become the coach. Now you got to find out how to motivate everyone on your team, in your office. And so now the real work comes, because now you got to figure out all those different personalities and what makes them
Oh
tick.
yeah. Yeah. That's the frontline management is always the most difficult, right? Not because you're always
Yeah.
needed, but then you have to find out what works for everybody because it's not a one size fits all. You have to lead in a differentiated manner. It's funny though, because you give that example, and I think, to kind of, and I'm glad you went down that road to kind of land the plane here a little bit. Whatever performance industry you're in, whether it's business or sports, it's all tied to that one thing. That is your process. What are your non-negotiables? What are part of your actionable items that you need to do every single day? Right? Is it for business? Is it 20 reach outs? Well, don't do 19, do 20. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Sticking to the plan that you created or co-authored with your coach in order to create that success and that momentum. And then when you gain that momentum, whether it's on the playing field, in the pool, on the court, or in the boardroom, you continue to execute those items.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. And now as a coach, as the manager of his team, he's like, wow, it really is that simple, but it's really, it takes a lot of work to convince people that it's that simple. And he's like, it'll take him 6 months just to realize it is that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, follow the recipe, right? You look at a recipe for the best chocolate cake in the world. You're going to look at it. You're like, really? Like, that's what I got to do? And then you're going to be doing, and then you're questioning it the whole time. Right.
Yeah.
Like, did it say like a quarter cup or whatever? Like, you sure that's enough? Like, all right, whatever, I'll do it, but whatever, it ain't going to work. And then you bake that cake and it comes out amazing. You're like, oh, okay. Trust the process. Let me do that again tomorrow. Man, I tell you what, man, the only bad thing is we don't have like 3 hours to talk because I'm learning so much from you, and I've truly appreciated, our conversation, and I'm looking forward to continued conversations offline, hopefully, and building a relationship with you. And, man, I got to tell you, it was an absolute honor of mine to have you on the show today. And, man, how can my audience best support you?
Well, if they want to go to the website, I'm always here. I try to put all the interviews that I've done, be a resource. I've always been an open book. So, if they want to go, it's just my full name, sethpepper.com. And again, I just feel like my story personally, and then the work that we do, is really important in the world right now. I think that it's in big demand, and just to know that first of all, this is that powerful, and then also to be able to manage it so that you're kind of working with both performance and health simultaneously, and trying to shed some light in the ecosystem right now, because there's a huge demand to try and figure this thing out. And
Absolutely.
so I try to be supportive whatever way I can.
Absolutely. And I think your Instagram handle too. I know you're not big in social media, but it's at Seth Pepper, right?
Yeah, I try to do Seth Pepper across the board. So same thing on LinkedIn, and yeah. So
cool.
So yeah.
Awesome. I guess the biggest question of the day is like, how can I best support you? Is there anything that I can do to help spread your message? Whatever you need, man. I'd like to know.
I just have enjoyed the podcast. I hope that it reaches, out there. It's like a little child, right? You release it into the world and see who it touches. And so just keep doing what you're doing. I think you ask great questions. I was saying, we are the audience, right? So I know that I've said things to you that I haven't said to others, and I'm speaking really clearly. So you must be really clear. I like to say to other people, the people that I work with, I'm like, you have to see greatness in yourself before you can see it in others, because I can spot it. I swear to you, I could spot greatness, and it is a tangible thing. So it must be something I can see in myself. So I can see that in you. So,
I appreciate that,
the conversation has been really, not only a lot of fun, but I think that there was a lot of clarity, and, we went through a good journey together.
I think it was great. I think it was clear. I think it was fun. I think it was informative, and you stretched me, and I appreciate that. I was hoping that you would, because, you and I have never had the opportunity to speak or connect prior to us hopping on this. And so you never know what you're going to get on the other side of the Zoom lens, right? So that's the fun of it. And, I feel like, the fun part about the episode was giving all the information, but then also too, like really just learning each other. And I think that, there's a big mission out there to improve the mental aspect in youth sports and even professional sports, collegiate level, Olympic level, and just bringing awareness with high level individuals like yourself. I think for me, it's more than a dream. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And it's 100% mutual, and let's go out there and help some people.
Let's do this. Well, I'm going to conclude the episode here. Hang out when we're done recording. I want to talk to you really quick. But you heard it here, guys. The mind is the most powerful thing that you have, and anything you want in this life, if you are clear on it and you speak it to existence and you visualize it every single day with clarity, it can come to pass. And so, you heard it here first on how to unlimit your potential with Seth Pepper. Share the show, guys. If you're listening to this, please share it out. Share it with your friends, your family, an athlete you may know, a coach, whomever. But that's how we're going to grow. And that's how this message is going to get out there. The message dies with us unless you guys share it. So I appreciate you all. Until the next time, y'all be good.